Ah, the Renaissance, a period of time literally everyone knows about because it's in just about every history class, and for good reason. This is when much of what we know of civilization today came about, and when art sort of reached a peak after so long in stagnation. But I digress, because we are talking about theater in the Italian Renaissance. Now, the Italian Renaissance ushered in a lot of changes for theater, whether it was just new forms of theater or forms of theater that had ceased to exist for centuries, or even just physical theaters. The design of the theater changed during the Italian Renaissance, and in many cases, we sort of take that from it. For example, sort of thrust stages and prosceniums were all sort of, in some ways, innovations of the Italian theater, and without the Renaissance, we would not have many of the very basic core physical foundations of theater we know of today. But perhaps the most monumental contribution of the Italian Renaissance to the world of theater is opera. Opera came about in the late 16th century in this changing of times as this new sort of form of theater, this marriage of so many things: acting, dance, writing, song, music. And it has lived on for centuries and gone through so many changes and so many evolutions. At its core, opera is performative music. There are many different kinds of opera, many different authors with different styles, many different genres. There are also different kinds of singing: recitative, a speech-inflected style, and self-contained arias, which are more musical. We'll show you a clip of an aria now. As I said, different composers brought their own stylings to opera. Composers like Amadeus Mozart, Richard Wagner, and Giuseppe Verdi all brought different things to the field of opera and changed it forever. And now, modern opera is alive and well, whether it's continuing productions of old shows or new innovations like this wacky nonsense you see on screen behind you. Like, there are so many different forms of opera to be observed and learned about, and I personally don't know enough about it to sort of go as in-depth into it as the subject deserves. I mean, there's so much information out there and so much to be gleaned from opera, and it doesn't even have to be about opera. Like, it teaches you about theater. And just the sort of evolution of opera from the Renaissance to nowadays, where we see strange sort of modern spectacles like this, or even story-driven operas like the one on screen right now is about a transgender person's transition. It's fascinating. Opera is a foundational element of theater that was formed in the Italian Renaissance. Now let's look at it. On to Commedia dell'arte, another staple of the Italian Renaissance, which I will let my special guest artist Brian David Gilbert introduce you all to.
And it's so obviously the Commedia dell'arte that I don't need to explain it, but I will, for the sake of extending this video. The Commedia dell'arte was an Italian form of theater that was big in the 16th to 18th centuries, and it relied on stock characters wearing masks or costumes to designate who they were. That way the audience could be like, "Ah, that dude's wearing a tight-fitting suit with a bunch of weird patches, that must be Arlecchino, the servant clown sometimes to two masters!" This brought the audience in immediately. They knew what that character was about without any exposition.
Thank you, Brian. You can get back in your cage now. To break it down simply, Commedia dell'arte is outrageous improvised comedy, which allows for insane scenarios using these stock characters that are instantly recognizable by anyone who sees them, and the comedy comes from the situations they get into as well as just their appearance. I mean, look at those beards. They're so pointy. Commedia dell'arte was pioneered by a man named Andrea Calmo, who was an Italian actor and author of the early period. But Andrea was not the only one of the early pioneers. In fact, he and his peers because he was very Commedia dell'arte out of a mishmash of various wanted to usher in an age of theater that was before and lived on to this day. For example, large crowds and make the actors and producers a lot of money in the process. Integral part of Commedia dell'arte. Also, stock characters, which were based on various characters that existed in plays before this, specifically drawing inspiration from the Commedia erudita, which preceded the Commedia dell'arte and was much more scripted and regimented in its form and flow. However, Commedia dell'arte was... Wow. Wow, that is... Oh. Whew, sorry. Commedia dell'arte lives on today in the form of improv troupes. We all know them. We've all seen improv sketch comedies on TV or YouTubes or sometimes even in theater. Those are basically just modern-day Commedia dell'arte. They are troupes of actors working off of scripts, basically just filling in these standard characters and just bringing to life these traditions that have existed for hundreds and hundreds of years.